Carl lived in a quiet town in Indiana, where everyone knew your name but not your struggles. He worked long shifts at a local hardware store, came home to a rented trailer, and counted coins to fill his gas tank. Life wasn't tragic, just tight. A never-ending cycle of working, paying, and hoping things would somehow change. He wasn't chasing riches, just breathing room. But even that felt like too much to ask some days. He had a worn-out routine. Eggs for breakfast, coffee from a drip pot older than him, and bills lined up on the fridge like trophies of survival. Weekends meant fixing things for neighbors to earn a few extra bucks, or just sitting on his porch watching trucks pass by. He wasn't unhappy, just stuck. Like many folks in towns where dreams fade quietly, Carl had long stopped thinking that anything wild could happen to someone like him. Then came that Thursday, the kind you forget unless something unforgettable happens. On a whim, using leftover change from his lunch, Carl bought a lottery ticket at the gas station. He almost threw it away the next morning, thinking it was a waste. But when he scratched off the numbers and saw them match, he sat in silence. Not joy, not disbelief, just silence, as if his mind couldn't fit the idea that he had won $4.7 million. The news spread fast. His co-workers clapped him on the back. Old friends he hadn't heard from in years popped up in his messages. Carl smiled through it all, but inside, he felt something he couldn't name. A mix of excitement and fear. All his problems were supposed to be over now, right? Carl didn't waste time. Within weeks, he quit his job at the hardware store, paid off every debt he had, and moved into a fully furnished condo on the edge of downtown. No more frozen dinners or leaking ceilings. Now he had a view of the city skyline and a fridge that buzzed with champagne. Felt surreal. He still woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit, but now it was to silence, not stress. He bought a brand new truck, something he used to only admire from behind the register. Then came a second car, flashier, fast, red. People noticed. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Cousins he hadn't spoken to in a decade suddenly wanted to reconnect. Old friends invited him to dinners. Carl wasn't used to being the center of attention, but he liked how it felt. Needed, admired, wanted. He started traveling too. First it was Miami, then Las Vegas, then California. Expensive hotels, rooftop bars, bottle service. For a man who once worried about $20 gas, it was dizzying. There were no limits now, just yes after yes. He said yes to trips, to watches, to people who made him feel important. In every new city, he told himself, I earned this. And maybe he had. But something deeper was shifting. For the first time in his life, Carl had control, or at least he thought he did. No boss, no rent worries, no scraping by. He walked into stores and didn't look at price tags. He tipped waiters like a king. But beneath the surface of that confidence, something was growing, a kind of pressure he couldn't name. Because deep down, Carl knew. Money had changed his life, but he wasn't sure if it had changed him, or just covered something up. At first, Carl convinced himself that life was finally good. The parties were bigger, the people louder, and the attention constant. But in the quiet moments, alone in his condo, scrolling through messages, something felt off. The laughter around him started sounding hollow. The people who once felt like fun now felt like noise. He couldn't shake the sense that he was surrounded, yet deeply alone. Calls from family became more frequent, but they all had a pattern. They started warm, ended with a request. Just a little help with rent. Can you spot me for a new car? Carl wanted to believe they loved him for who he was, not what he had. But every favor made him question that. And when he said no, even once, the silence from the other side spoke louder than words. He noticed it with friends too. The ones who used to hang out at his place, playing cards and eating takeout, now only showed up for fancy dinners or expensive weekends. They didn't ask how he was, just where they were going next. He started testing people, leaving his wallet behind, going silent for a few days. Most of them vanished just as fast as they had appeared. Still, Carl tried to ignore the signs. He buried the discomfort under new distractions. Another trip, another party, another watch. He told himself he was just being paranoid, that maybe wealth just made people weird. But somewhere deep inside, he started to feel like a stranger in his own life. The freedom he once felt now came with chains he couldn't see, but could definitely feel. Carl didn't want the money to just sit there, he wanted it to grow. So when people came to him with business ideas, he listened. A friend of a friend had a can't-miss opportunity in crypto. Another claimed he could flip houses with huge returns. Carl nodded along, trusting their confidence more than the facts. He didn't read contracts. He didn't ask the right questions. At first, it seemed like things were going fine. A few investments showed early signs of promise. Carl took it as proof that he was doing the right thing. But slowly, the cracks began to show. The calls stopped being answered. Updates turned into excuses. The people who once rushed to pitch him ideas now avoided eye contact, or vanished altogether. The losses came in waves. One property deal went south because permits weren't filed. A luxury car rental business he backed got caught in legal trouble. Another investment partner fled the state. Carl tried to act like everything was okay. Still dressing sharp, still posting the good life online. But behind closed doors, his accounts were draining, fast. He started selling things quietly. The red car, then the condo. He moved into a smaller place across town and told people he just wanted something simpler. But the truth was heavier. Carl had gone from broke to rich and was now sliding right back down. Only this time it wasn't bad luck. It was his own choices. And he was running out of ways to pretend everything was fine. It didn't happen all at once. First, it was the condo. Then came the cars, one by one. Carl sold them off just to cover debts. Each loss stung a little more than the last, until he was left with nothing but a rented apartment on the outskirts of town. The luxurious life he once flaunted now felt like a distant dream, a life that belonged to someone else. Carl had no one left to turn to, no family, no friends, no partners. The calls stopped coming. No more invites to fancy dinners. No more messages asking how things were going. The people who once surrounded him had vanished, and the few who remained were no longer offering help, just words of pity or mockery. A few even laughed at his downfall, as if his success had been nothing but a joke. It was humiliating. Carl wasn't just losing his money, he was losing his dignity. He couldn't bring himself to face his past decisions. The shame weighed on him, and it felt like the world had turned its back. He found himself sitting alone in the small apartment, staring at his empty bank account, wondering where it had all gone wrong. The carefree man who once spent money without thinking was now consumed by regret and the reality that everything he had built was gone. He hadn't just lost his fortune, he had lost himself. Carl tried to return to the basics, the simple life he once knew. But it wasn't the same anymore. No longer was there peace in the small things. Each day felt like a struggle to put one foot in front of the other. The man who had lived without worries now found himself paralyzed by the weight of his failures. But deep down, Carl knew he had to face his mistakes. It was the only way out of the wreckage he had created. Carl had never imagined himself working in a small cafe, serving coffee to strangers. Yet, there he was, behind the counter, wiping down tables and taking orders. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, something he hadn't known in a long time. The days were long, the pay was modest, but there was something different about this life. For the first time in years, he felt a small flicker of peace. He started listening to the stories of the regulars. A grandmother who had worked the same job for decades just to support her family. A young man who'd started a landscaping business from nothing. Every person who came in seemed to have a humble tale of struggle, but they wore their hardships with dignity. Carl couldn't help but notice the strength in their stories. Strength he had forgotten existed. They didn't have luxury or fame, but they had something far more valuable. A sense of purpose. The contrast hit Carl hard. He had once believed that success was about money, fame, and material possessions. But as he poured coffee and listened, he realized he had been chasing the wrong things. The people who sat in that small cafe didn't measure their worth by what they had, but by who they were. They had faced adversity without losing their sense of self. Carl, on the other hand, had allowed his wealth to define him, and in doing so had lost sight of everything that truly mattered. It wasn't an easy realization. Carl had built his life around the belief that money was the key to happiness, and to now see the value in simple living was a humbling experience. But as the days passed, he started to feel something he hadn't in years: hope. The man who had once been driven by pride and ego was now beginning to understand that true wealth was not about what you could buy, but about what you could give, share, and learn from others. Carl's days at the cafe weren't just about serving coffee anymore. He spent his free time reading books on finance, purpose, and personal growth. At first, it felt foreign. He had always thought money was the answer to everything. But as he dug deeper into the pages of self-help books and listened to podcasts about wealth beyond dollars, Carl began to see the world differently. It wasn't about the fast climb to success. It was about building something meaningful, something lasting. He started to see his past mistakes not as failures, but as lessons. Carl realized that losing everything wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. He'd spent so much of his life focusing on material wealth. He had never stopped to ask himself what truly mattered. Now he was listening more than he was talking, paying attention to the stories of others who had walked through struggles and emerged stronger. In their wisdom, he found a kind of clarity he had never known before. Carl took this new perspective and began helping others. He started small, offering advice to those who struggled with money management and teaching the lessons he'd learned the hard way. It felt good to give back, to show others that their financial struggles didn't define their worth. Every conversation, every small act of kindness, brought him closer to understanding that true wealth was about connection, purpose, and the impact you had on those around you. For the first time in a long while, Carl wasn't trying to chase after the next big thing. Instead, he was focused on building something that would last, not with dollars but with trust and shared knowledge. He had learned from his fall. It wasn't just about bouncing back financially. It was about finding meaning in every step, in every moment, and in every person he met. He realized that the true freedom he had been searching for wasn't in luxury, but in purpose. Carl's fall from grace became the foundation for something far greater than he had ever imagined. He realized that the lessons he had learned could help others avoid making the same mistakes he had. With newfound clarity and purpose, Carl set out to share his story. He began speaking at local schools, sharing the realities of sudden wealth and the importance of financial responsibility. His message wasn't about the dangers of winning the lottery. It was about understanding the value of hard work, responsibility, and living with integrity. Soon, Carl was invited to speak at small community events, where people struggling with debt and financial turmoil gathered to hear his words. He spoke from the heart, knowing the pain and confusion many of them were feeling because he had lived it himself. Carl became a mentor to former lottery winners who had lost their fortunes, and to those who were struggling to get back on their feet after financial setbacks. His advice wasn't complicated. It was simple. Manage your money wisely, understand what truly matters, and never forget where you came from. His mission grew beyond just speaking engagements. Carl started hosting workshops where he could work one-on-one with individuals and families, helping them develop practical financial plans. The focus wasn't on getting rich quick, but on creating lasting financial health through planning, budgeting, and investing in their future. Each story he heard fueled his passion to do more, to teach others how to find stability, purpose, and fulfillment in their lives, without the need for fame or fortune. Carl's newfound mission wasn't just about avoiding mistakes. It was about giving others the opportunity to find their own sense of purpose. He understood that everyone's journey was different, but the lessons he had learned through his own fall were universal. His life had come full circle. The man who had once been consumed by wealth now found fulfillment in empowering others to live meaningful, intentional lives. The mission he was on was no longer about money, but about making a difference. Carl's journey had come full circle, and he realized that the true measure of wealth wasn't just about money. With the lessons he had learned and the passion to help others, he decided to start his own business. It wasn't a flashy company aiming for quick profits. It was a business rooted in purpose. Carl's goal was clear: help people not only find financial stability but also personal fulfillment. He used his story, his struggles, and his triumphs to connect with his clients on a deep human level. At first, it wasn't easy. Starting from scratch again, Carl faced the same challenges many entrepreneurs do. Long hours, little money, and uncertainty. But this time, things felt different. The fear of losing everything no longer controlled him. He was driven by the desire to make a difference in people's lives. His business grew slowly, but every step forward was meaningful. He wasn't just building a business. He was building a legacy grounded in integrity and service to others. As Carl helped more clients, he realized that real wealth wasn't something that could be measured by bank balances or fancy possessions. It was found in the relationships he built, the impact he had on others, and the clarity of his own purpose. His business became a platform for educating individuals about not just financial planning, but about living a life that aligned with their values. Carl's success came not from chasing money but from understanding that true wealth comes from within. A peace of mind, a sense of purpose, and the ability to give back. Now, Carl was living a different life. The money he made no longer felt like a burden, but a tool to create positive change. He no longer sought validation from the things he owned or the opinions of others. Instead, he was focused on making a difference in the world, one person at a time. His business was profitable, but more importantly, it brought him peace. He had built real wealth inside and out, and that was a treasure that no amount of money could ever replace. Carl's life had changed in ways he never expected. Gone were the days of flashy cars, expensive vacations, and extravagant parties. Instead, he found himself living in a modest home, surrounded by the people who mattered most. There was no longer a desire to impress anyone with wealth. What Carl had now was something far more valuable: peace, purpose, and deep, meaningful connections. His life was simpler, but it was richer than anything money could buy. People often asked him if he wished he could go back to those days when he had everything. His answer was always the same: no. I needed to lose everything to understand what really matters. He realized that his true wealth wasn't found in the things he owned, but in the way he lived his life now. The lessons learned through his struggles had given him the clarity to understand that happiness doesn't come from accumulating wealth. It comes from finding meaning in the everyday moments and in helping others. Though he didn't have the luxury he once enjoyed, Carl felt a sense of fulfillment that far exceeded any material possession. He woke up each day knowing he was making a difference. He was content with the life he had built, and the satisfaction of knowing he was on the right path brought him a happiness that his former wealth had never provided. It wasn't about how much he had anymore. It was about the difference he was making in the world. Carl had learned that true richness comes from living with intention and embracing life with an open heart. His story wasn't just about losing money. It was about gaining wisdom, finding purpose, and becoming the man he was always meant to be. In his heart, he knew he was richer now than he had ever been before. It was a different kind of wealth, but it was the one that mattered most. If you found Carl's story inspiring, don't forget to leave a comment below and share your thoughts on what true wealth means to you. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Millionaire Breakthrough for more life-changing stories of transformation and success. Join our community and be part of the journey toward growth and purpose. Let's continue to break through the limits and build lives of real value together.